Welcome in. Saturday night means it's time for DFS Chalk Talk, brought to you by Triple Play Fantasy, and we begin right after this. Oh, yes, indeed. It is time to get out of that kitchen and rattle those pots and pans. I am your host tonight, Jeff Mesha. As always, I am joined by two of the best analysts in the business. To my right, we got Mikey. What's going on, brother?
Not much. It's Saturday night. We ain't got nobody. I got some money because I just got paid, man. That's about it. Because if you followed along with us last week, you definitely got paid. So because we had some thick lineups with some Mostert. I don't think we had any Kane in any of ours. But, man, it was a good week last week for me anyway. So.
Indeed. Certainly called that one right on the bargain play. And down below, we got Joe. What's up, man?
You're a goon. I thought it's probably the biggest, like when I was making my lineup on DraftKings, probably the biggest question of the week is like, what do you do with those Miami running backs? Because they were both so good last week. Like you feel like you want some action there. Should be one of the higher scoring games of the week. But I don't know. I mean, Denver, it was Swiss cheese for both of them. That's not going to happen in a normal week. It's not going to happen this week necessarily against Buffalo. So which one of those guys gets in the end zone and gets those red zone touches? I feel like it's a 50-50 toss-up.
Should be interesting. If you have not joined us before, we talk about all things DFS, mainly FanDuel and DraftKings. Mikey and I cover FanDuel, and Joe over there in Connecticut cannot get FanDuel, so he covers the DraftKings for us. The way we usually kick things off, well, I'll start off with who you're paying up for this week. Mike, who are you paying? Oh, Joe's got – go ahead, man. Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead, Joe.
How dare you?
No, you're right.
So real quick, because there are some things here, some of the quarterbacks who were out last week will be back this week, like Richardson for Indianapolis. Obviously, Joe Burrow's playing through his calf injury. One new legit questionable that popped up this week is Deshaun Watson. He truly seems to be a 1 p.m. game time decision tomorrow. Cleveland at home against Baltimore. You got Derek Carr, who probably is not going to start tomorrow for New Orleans. He's questionable right now, but it feels like Jameis Winston's going to start for New Orleans. I don't really feel like that's a negative impact for those. Like, I feel like Olave is going to do the same thing with either one of those quarterbacks, and probably the same as with Michael Thomas. Jimmy Garoppolo is out in Las Vegas. Brian Hoyer figures to get the start, which is kind of too bad because they're playing the Chargers. If you had Garoppolo going, you figured you're slated for another 40 to 30 game. Chargers probably squeeze it out. Now you figure the Chargers win, but can the Raiders, can Devonta Adams get his 100 and a touchdown from Brian Hoyer? I guess we shall see. Bryce Young is back for Carolina this week after Andy Dalton lit it up in his absence last week. And that's it for quarterbacks. Real quick on the running back front, Austin Eckler looks like he's going to miss another game, but it feels like Josh Kelly and anybody else in that backfield is kind of fool's gold at this point. It really hasn't gone well for those backup running backs there for the Chargers. We have got Miles Sanders looks to be a true game time decision for Carolina, home against Minnesota. Somewhat relevant. He's probably going to have a pretty good game if he can get his full workload in. And that's it really for major running backs. Wideouts have been pretty healthy so far this year, if you think about it. I don't feel like Mike Williams obviously is out for the year for the Chargers now. Other than that, it's a pretty clean bill of health. It looks like Hollywood Brown is questionable for Arizona. Bateman's out for Baltimore. Beckham's out for Baltimore. So Zay Flowers once again will be the number one there at Cleveland. Treylon Burks is out for Tennessee this week. Maybe that makes for a bigger week for Hopkins. Who knows? And all right, take it away, Jeff.
All right. Well, I appreciate it. And I didn't mean to get ahead of myself on that one. Like I said, usually we'll start with the injuries, then we roll into who we're paying up for our DFS lineups. Mike, who you paying up for, man?
The first guy I'm paying up for is Raheem Mostert. I'm double dipping back into that. Well, I understand the hesitation there, especially against that Buffalo defense. I just don't think that Buffalo defense has faced anything like this high octane Miami offense, and they're going to have Jalen Waddle back, so they're going to be even that much more of a threat. So I feel like he's going to be a great play at 7,900. Like I said, at Buffalo, I think they're going to have to run the ball quite a bit to control that game. And then my other guy that I paid up for is, in fact, Davante Adams at 8,100 at Los Angeles Chargers. It should be a high-volume game for him. I feel like he's going to get a lot of targets. He's going to be able to do a lot with the targets because he is Davante Adams. At 8,100, I think he's quite a steal in this matchup. So those are the two guys I'm paying up for there, Jeff.
Right on, man. Right on. And I will say that the Mostert one, while I can agree with it for sure, it's one of those things you kind of – Joe and I did a show a while back when we were doing 2 tickets. We named it Watch Out for Pitfalls. And the point of that is just not to necessarily go with a guy specifically based on the previous week alone, kind of got to go with the body work. Now, don't get me wrong. Mostert and a chain, however you want to pronounce his last name, certainly deserve the hype. It's just I'm a little bit wary of past situations. Joe, you had something to say?
What's his FanDuel price?
7,900.
Mostert?
79?
7,900, yes, sir.
He's 65 on DraftKings. Yeah, it's an interesting one. I see, like 65 on DraftKings feels a little less pricey than 79 on FanDuel.
Pretty close to about the same. Just when you look at the DraftKings and FanDuel, we're about the same area, maybe a couple $100 off there, I would feel. The thing about it is, I mean, he had a great game the week before against New England. He put up 25 on FanDuel. And then last week he put up 41.7. So I feel like even if you hit that floor of 25.2, you're going to be a pretty happy camper. So I was willing to pay up for Mostert. Like I said, I can see the red flags there, especially with Mostert. But, man, until you can find a way to slow Miami down, I'm all in.
No, you're right, Mike. And you make a good point with Mostert. Maybe my hesitation is more with the rookie there than it is Mostert. So I like that pick. Joe, who are you paying up for?
Yeah, I mean, I'm gonna go 7,100 at quarterback. Kirk Cousins this week at Carolina. I mean, doesn't matter who gives a shit. Minnesota's 0-3. We all know that. Cousins has gone for 22, 32, and 29 DraftKings points so far in 3 weeks, and I don't expect the Carolina defense to put up much of a fight. And then the other one, I mean, it's Keenan Allen, 7,900 on DraftKings. There's no Mike Williams. They've got no Eckler. They're playing the Raiders. It's just throw. I just don't see, and he's cheaper than a lot of other guys. He's cheaper than Adams, Diggs, Hill, and Jefferson, which I guess makes sense to an extent. But I mean, it's really, if you look at Jefferson, Hill, and Keenan Allen specifically, those three, man, have really just been insane this year. But Keenan Allen, 7,900, number one production, but he's 1,700 less than Jefferson and 1,300 less than Tyreek Hill on DraftKings.
Right on. And that's always something interesting, the variations between DraftKings and FanDuel, because as I look at FanDuel, Keenan Allen is the third most expensive overall, or second for wide receivers behind Tyreek Hill. So Hill's 9,600, Keenan Allen's 9,500. He's even $100 more expensive than Justin Jefferson this week. So it's always interesting to kind of see the disparity there between FanDuel and DraftKings.
Because to Mike's point, I think like 900, 8 to 900 is like the mathematical equivalent that FanDuel is going to be like 8 to 900 more based on how the salary works and the number of spots. So when you're talking like 17, 1,800 there and some, that's the difference between his FanDuel and DraftKings price. That's a lot.
Yeah, absolutely. So, and as far as who I'm paying up for this week, I'm going Christian McCaffrey. I don't care. He's the most expensive person overall, period. He's 9,700 on FanDuel. I'm not too sure what he is on DraftKings, but the guy deserves it. This is he's got 13 games with San Francisco under his belt. In those 13 games, he has scored 13 touchdowns. He has averaged all in 121 all-purpose yards per game. He's averaged 24 fantasy points per game. I do not see this guy slowing down against a pitiful Arizona defense. I don't know what you guys think about that one, but Christian McCaffrey is who I'm paying up for.
Yeah, he's 9,200 on DraftKings. I mean, I don't know how you can really argue with him. Deebo Samuel is a pretty true game time decision for San Francisco tomorrow. If he doesn't go, it feels like it would make me like McCaffrey even more.
Right on.
Absolutely.
And then on the flip side of that, and Mike alluded to it earlier, because we always do the bargain. Who are going to get that are not necessarily the chalk guys who are kind of down a little bit lower as far as salary is concerned. Mike hit the nail on the head with Mostert, obviously, last week. How about this week, Mike? Who's your bargain?
So I like Donald Parham Jr. Now, his touchdown production was all that it took for him to be fantasy viable last week at 13.4. But when you start looking at tight end numbers, man, like if you're even Travis Kelce's putting up barely in the 15-17 range, there hasn't been really any huge tight end action going on. I mean, Pharaoh Brown was one of the top scorers in the past couple of weeks. That's how insane this tight end landscape has been. So I feel like with Mike Williams out, I really like to see where Justin Herbert's looking when he's looking in the red zone. And it seems to be his direction. We're also going to be missing Austin Eckler. That's one less weapon there. So Keenan Allen will probably only score 4 touchdowns. I think that Donald Parham can probably score those other 2. So that's where I'm leaning on for somebody that's cheap. And then another guy that I got, because, at 4,900, man, that's a steal. And another guy that I just can't believe is still as cheap as he is, Tank Dell, Houston hosting Pittsburgh. 6,200, man. 6,200 on DraftKings still. This guy's putting up numbers, averaging 15 fantasy points a week on FanDuel. So those are the 2 guys I'm paying down for. Now, self-admittingly, I do have $700 salary remaining. And in the past 48 hours, it's been Tank Dell and it's been Nico Collins. It's been flashing back and forth between those guys. Nico Collins at 6,400. I think they're both going to be a solid play this weekend against Pittsburgh. I think you're going to have to throw the ball a lot. But I do like Tank Dell. I liked what I saw out of him last week. I think we can see a repeat of that as the performance goes on.
Indeed, man. How do you dislike a guy named Tank? In any case, Joe, who's your bargain this week?
Well, I mean, it makes me feel good about my own lineup because it's the exact same 2 guys that Mike just mentioned, Tank Dell and Donald Parham, for all the reasons he just said it. That being said, there are some other guys here. I'll give 2 more. I'm going back to the Jerome Ford well for Cleveland, home against Baltimore. Zach Moss ran all over and through the Baltimore defense last week, so no reason to think Ford doesn't visit the end zone again. He's still only 53 on DraftKings. And then the other one I would say that is worth, and it's not so real quick, Adam Thielen's only 4,500 on DraftKings, and they're home against Minnesota. And he's been great 2 out of the 3 weeks this year. So I don't really understand that. So I think that's absolutely worth it. But one other thing that I'll say, and I just mentioned him, and he's 6,000 on DraftKings, so you're not paying overly down for him anymore. But I don't think we can ignore Zach Moss's season anymore. The last 2 weeks, I don't think anybody at the beginning of the year wanted to touch the Indianapolis offense fantasy wise. That being said, the guy's been over 20 the last 2 weeks, 30 for 122 last week, and another couple catches and a touchdown. And there's he's getting like every freaking offensive snap pretty much at running back. They're not even really using anybody else. And Jonathan Taylor is no closer to coming back to Indianapolis. So I think Zach Moss has to start to get our attention from a DFS perspective.
No doubt.
Does anybody here believe that Jonathan Taylor will ever play as an Indianapolis Colt again?
I just want him to play in general. I drafted him, and I just want him to just play somewhere. Go trade him. Let's get him on the field, please.
I think Jonathan Taylor Thomas from Home Improvement has a better shot at getting on the field for the Colts than Jonathan Taylor, the running back.
I completely agree with that statement right there.
So as far as bargains for me, I got a couple. I went 2 wide receivers. One was from a game we've talked about a lot. You guys brought up. So I've got Josh Palmer. He's at home versus the Raiders, 6,100 on FanDuel. He's got 12 targets the last 2 games, not burning it up, but with the Mike Williams injury and the attention that Keenan Allen has been demanding over the last few games, I see him, getting a decent amount of targets and possibly getting in the end zone this week. So especially with that, it's a halfway decent over-under. Miami and Buffalo has the highest one of this week, but I still see the Chargers putting up some points for sure. And then my other one is Tutu Atwell. And why? Because I just like saying Tutu. He's 6,300 at Indianapolis, 26 targets through the first 3 games. And Nakua has gotten a lot of the fantasy attention. But, I mean, really, Atwell has flown under the radar, and he has been very productive from a fantasy standpoint, too. So I like him this week at Indianapolis. Those are my 2 as far as bargain is concerned.
As far as the Jonathan Taylor question goes, with the Rams at least, McVay's dangled the carrot that Cooper Kupp might actually come back after week 4. So that would also, I got, for people who have him, to be nice to see him and Nakua together. That'll be, I mean, Stafford have some weapons there with Kupp coming back.
Oh, no doubt. Certainly something to keep an eye on there for sure. And the Rams passing game has been a little bit better than expected without Kupp there, so it should be interesting when he comes back. So as far as full lineup is concerned, Mike, why don't you give us a quick rundown of who you're going with?
Okay, so I'm going up against Denver with Justin Fields. I don't know if anybody got to watch that game last week or if anybody's been paying attention, but in week 1, Denver allowed 17 points. In week 2, they allowed 35 points. Last week, they allowed 70 points. So at this current rate, I'm assuming Justin Fields should be able to put up 140 points against that legendary Denver defense. Thanks, guys. Appreciate you. Love you down here in Florida still, even though I hate you. He's at 7,200. I think it's against Denver. Such a poor defense. Give it to me. My running back's Josh Kelly. I know you were talking trash on him. I feel like Josh Kelly's going to have himself a good game. I think he's due for it. I think we've just seen him in situations where they're not playing him as often. I think against the Raiders, we're going to have plenty of time to get him on the field. We talked about Mostert. Puka, man, I love Puka Nakua. I think he's going to hit the end zone for the first time this week at 7,500. He's a bargain. Tank Dell, we talked about him. Jacoby Myers, man. Jacoby Myers is having himself a quietly good season. He's going to be back on the field. They're going to have to throw a lot. The Chargers are going to score a lot. Give me Jacoby at 6,900. We talked about Donald Parham. We talked Devontae Adams, and then give me that Steelers defense against Houston because, man, that Steelers defense is rock solid. I'm loving it.
So you're going the Raiders 1 and 2 wideouts with Hoyer starting. Is that correct?
I am, yes. Yeah, I think that game's going to have plenty of scoring going on.
Jacoby Myers looked fun. I mean, and I know he missed week 2. Well, he had a great week 1, missed week 2, I believe, with a concussion. Watching him against the Steelers, he is getting a lot of targets there. And I mean, I know it was Garoppolo, obviously, and not Hoyer, but Hoyer's got a familiarity with him from New England. So you would imagine that Myers would get a nice share of targets tomorrow, I would think.
Yeah, absolutely. Yep, and having a concussion on Jimmy Garoppolo, that does hurt. Both the values there, but I mean, they're still going to have to throw it to him an awful lot because they're going to be down in that game.
Right on. Yeah, it should be an interesting game to watch out for. Joe, who's your in your full lineup this week?
All right, we got Kirk Cousins, 7,100 at Carolina. Guy's been a cash cow fantasy-wise. I don't see the Carolina defense changing that. We're going Zach Moss, 6,000, Indianapolis, home against the Rams. He's really the only show in town there for Indianapolis running backs right now. The other one, we didn't talk about him yet, but I mean, he's still under 6,000. I don't really understand how that's possible, but DeAndre Swift, 5,700. Eagles home against Washington. Swift has ran for 305 yards in the last 2 games on 44 carries and a touchdown. Add another four receptions. So he is doing everything we wanted him to do in Philly. Keenan Allen, 7,900 for the Chargers. I mean, he's just it's phenomenal what he's doing, so late in his career. It's great to see. We talked about Diamond in the Rough, Tank Dell, 4,600, Houston. I do get concerned, like, is it going to be Nico Collins? Is it going to be Tank Dell? They've already proven they can both have a good game on the same week. So I do like Dell there for 4,600. I don't understand how Adam Thielen's only 4,500. And I'm not a huge Adam Thielen fan by any means, but the guy's been over 20 and then 34 last week. So 2 phenomenal weeks in a row. So that's one Andy Dalton week, 1 Bryce Young week. So he'll get Bryce Young back. Minnesota's going to score some points. So I really like Thielen there. Love the Donald Parham play. He's been getting in the end zone anyways. Now without Mike Williams, got to assume they'll do more 2 tight end sets with him and Everett, like that for the Chargers. My flex right now, I have Deebo Samuel in. If he's getting a full workload, I love him tomorrow against Arizona. That being said, it's definitely a 50-50 shot that he might not play. And in that case, I would take him out and I would put Mr. Mostert in that flex position. It would save me a couple $100 too. And, Mikey already talked about it. Well, we've talked about it. There's a risk there, obviously, with the other guy being there now. Game script, I guess maybe is a little bit of a risk, but Mostert's just been lights out for Miami. And the Buffalo defense is decent, but I don't feel like it's, shut down rushing type defense. And then I am playing the Eagle defense home against Washington. Sam Howell just got picked apart by the Buffalo defense last week. That was in Washington at Philadelphia. I got to believe that the Eagles are going to, what was that, Michael Irving thing?
Yeah.
On the Washington Commander offense.
Right on, dude. I like that. And since you're bringing up Thielen, he's 6,800 on FanDuel. That's
2,300 more. That's insane.
But to me, that's a halfway decent play, even that, because Jacoby Myers 6,900, so that's a halfway decent play, even at 6,800 on FanDuel. So full lineup
Plus
for me.
Playing Minnesota too. Think about that. Not that he left on bad terms, but they wide receivers. I feel like more than any other position in any sport, the wide receiver has that woman scorned game against their, like Deshaun Jackson has tore up Philadelphia and Washington in the past. There are a bunch of other examples, but yeah.
Yeah, absolutely, man. I like that one. So full lineup for me, actually, I'm going quarterback. Mikey and I are sharing a brain on that one. Justin Fields, I have not given up on that guy. I get it. He hasn't had the greatest of starts here. He's averaged about, I want to say, 11 fantasy points per game through the first 3 weeks. Last year, through weeks 1 through 5, he averaged 13 points per game and then absolutely went off weeks 6 through 17. I kind of feel like something like that is coming, and what a better team to get going against than Denver. So we should see some points out of Justin Fields and have him kind of have it be a get-right game, so to speak. Running back, I already brought up Christian McCaffrey at home versus Arizona, 9,700. My other running back, I had to find a little bit of money in there when you roster Christian McCaffrey. So I got Javonte Williams. He's at Chicago. Bears defense isn't the greatest. He's 5,800 on FanDuel. I guess we'll see. I like the guy to maybe get in the end zone once, perhaps put up about 80 yards or so. So that we shall see what happens there. Wide receiver, I already mentioned Tutu Atwell at Indianapolis. He's 6,300. Josh Palmer at home versus Las Vegas, 6,100. My other one is Mike Evans at New Orleans, 8,000. Evans has gotten a ton of attention, not a whole lot of fantasy accolades or at least attention from us or anybody talking about him too much, but Evans has been putting up some serious points. So at 8,000, I like Evans in that slot. Tight end wise, again, I had to find another bargain one, and Joe mentioned that tight ends is kind of a little bit of a crapshoot. So I'm going the youngster Dalton Kincaid at home versus the Dolphins. He's 4,800. Flex-wise, I'm going Derrick Henry at home versus the Bengals. He's 8,000. And then my defense is Cincinnati at Tennessee, 4,100. So that's what I got full roster-wise. It seems like, Mike, you agree with the Dalton Kincaid pick, my man.
I just love that people are starting to talk about Dalton Kincaid because I was very heavy on my drafting of him in this Dynasty rookie draft this year. I really like what he can do. I feel like he's going to be kind of one of the pegs that fit in to make this a championship-style team. My family prays to Josh Allen over here, so we get pretty excited about any kind of pieces for that. But I really think Dalton Kincaid is one of the answers to a lot of the problems that team has had. So
he's made his mark already. He's pretty much split in the target share with Knox. So I think that's a great start 3 weeks in. I look real quick. I look at that Denver-Chicago game, and you talk about Justin Fields, which is probably the number one guy that we would all like to see have a great game from a fantasy perspective, because then that's going to impact DJ Moore, and maybe that impacts the running backs too all around. But it's like I keep on saying to myself, well, somebody's got to win that game Then I'm like, well, somebody got to lose that game too. And the other guy was Javonte Williams. I was going to ask you guys, and then you had him in your lineup, Jeff, about him this week, because I feel like with Fields and Williams, I would say the same thing to both. If not this week, then it's not happening. I mean, for Fields, home against Denver, you're not going to have a softer defensive matchup pretty much, maybe home against Minnesota, I guess. But other than, pretty much for the year. And then for Denver, you're not going to have much of a softer matchup than Chicago. So for those guys specifically, it's like, if not this week, then they're going to the back of the bus.
Right on, man. Absolutely. So we appreciate everybody tuning in tonight. 13 hours from now, we are on the Blitz, and we will be taking all your questions relevant for tomorrow. And then actually the games start at 12 hours from now. You got Jacksonville versus Atlanta in London. So that's at 9:30. So an early start tomorrow. What's up, Joe?
Hey, real quick, you mind if I give, can we talk that single game line? We got a little single game lineup action for the London game tomorrow morning.
Go ahead.
Atlanta, Jacksonville, 9:30 a.m. start. And these London games are always so weird. But the offense is never running smooth, even if it's a good offense. It's just usually ugly football in London. Makes for a lot of close games, close finishes. But what we're rolling with is we're putting Christian Kirk in our captain spot this week. Zay Jones, that makes him 12,000. Zay Jones is out, so it really is going to be Kirk and Ridley there for Jacksonville. We're going Evan Ingram also for Jacksonville. He's gotten, I don't think there's too many tight ends who have received more targets than Ingram. He's got 21 targets so far through 3 weeks at tight end. We're sticking with Jacksonville. Travis Etienne, even last week, getting crushed by Houston. He went for 17. He had 21 week one. He's obviously the bell cow there from a running back perspective. We are going Bijan Robinson, 11,000 for the Falcons. I mean, he looks too good to not take, and he only had 10 last week at Detroit. So I expect him, after having 20 the first 2 games, to fire back. We are going Kyle Pitts. Mikey's talked about Kyle Pitts, like if not last week or this week, when, he went 5 for 41 on 9 targets last week. So that is encouraging.
Have targets. He did have targets. So we're gonna hang our hat on that and give that a go. And then somebody who I probably feel better about than Pitts, Young Koo, the Atlanta kicker. That guy's freaking money. And so that's quick single game DraftKings lineups for that London 9:30 a.m.
Right on. Appreciate you throwing that out there for anybody who wants to get in early on that one on either FanDuel or DraftKings. So appreciate that one, Joe. And like I said, we will be around taking your questions in 13 hours. We look forward to seeing everybody then. And until next time, as always, we have got you covered.